Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 8 of Ready, Set, Shag. I appreciate everyone coming by and everyone listening afterwards. We're now live on, well, not live on Spotify, but you can get this episode on Spotify. So if you're listening over there, thank you very much. I appreciate it. I know a couple of people are, and it's very much appreciated. Today, I'm joined by someone who I admire quite a bit. I've been able to speak with him before. He's been on the midweek hump a couple of times. You guys may have remembered if you've been following me long enough. But he runs an awesome, I guess it would be a lifestyle company, the No System, and he's formerly of Rooster Teeth, Mr. Brian Behm. How you doing, sir?
Hey, how are you? Thank you for
I'm,
having
yeah,
me.
dude.
So
Thank
hyped
you.
up after that intro. Yeah, both of me and the music. Dun, 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 dun.
You know what?
It's a very intense open for hello, I'm Brian. Like it's sort of an NPR thing. So
You know, I was thinking because I just kind of threw the intro together, like, and for people on Spotify and or listen to this as a podcast, you guys don't get to hear it, but it's a fairly epic little intro, quick little number, and I always feel it's a little bit off, but I don't know, it just kind of amped me up, and I always like those sort of epic, like trailer-esque, Marvel movie-esque, like intros, but it's probably a little like off key for the show.
no judgment on my part. I just think it's funny. I was just pointing it out. Actually, to speak to that, when I was at Rooster Teeth, there was this thing that we did called Let's Play Live,
Mhm.
kind of video games on stage.
Yeah.
And like you sort of do the same thing at the front of one of those because you need to build the energy up for them coming up on stage
Yeah.
because when you're playing video games on stage, that just does not translate the way a rock band does. And
Yes.
so you need to do whatever you can to bring the energy level up here so that once they finally start to get up on stage, like they've got the audience like all invested with them, and then the
Yeah.
show is different. So I used to end up making these like way over the top, very aggro intros like you were playing. Da, 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 welcome to the stage. Da, 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 like explosions and like you're the hype man. It's
Yeah.
like Flavor Flav with the clock around
The
your
clock.
neck.
Yeah. I gotta find my clock. Like I mean the intro, that's the podcast thing, but like I need to find my clock. Like maybe it's my beard. What do you think? Is that
Yeah, I mean,
yeah?
I could see that, like a coffee mug or something around your neck.
Dude, I love my coffee mugs, man. This is actually my wife. My wife, she uses it as like a cereal bowl. It's kind of weird. But for those who can't see, it's huge. It's really big. But I have like the Legion of Memers, bless their souls. They have an awesome coffee mug, but it's like 8 ounces. I don't drink 8 ounces of coffee at a time. I drink 16, 20.
No,
So,
I need the big mug.
right. Cheers, man. I mean, it's like, I don't know. I always bust No Green Rocks' balls about it because it's like, dude, you guys are like awesome. You make the best memes. You get this itty bitty 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 eeny meeny coffee cup. but uh, but yeah, no, being hyping people up. I think it's a big thing. And when you have like whether it's you're doing a live show or like I guess people don't hear it for a recorded one, but I don't know. I just like I've always felt I need to get myself amped up, and that kind of music just does it for me. Um, and I don't know. I guess it speaks to a higher like um, idea of the show. Like I want this to always feel like what you're going to get out of it is big and epic. Like even if it is just a one-on-one conversation, there's something big to be had here.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. I, I was just thinking about it, and like, I think one of the things that's interesting about what I do in not necessarily with no system, but with the rest of my life, like professionally, is it's sort of the same thing in a little bit. Working as a designer for broadcasts, um, or online. I mean, really just a designer in media. Like, we're working on packaging things to make it sexy and make it a little easier to, swallow, make the medicine go down in a slightly better way. So,
Yeah. Well, for
uh,
those who those who don't know you, and those who are just meeting you for the first time or hearing you for the first time, like, can you give us a little background on
Yeah.
what you did and now what you do?
So my name is Brian Behm, which, by the way, congratulations on saying it the right way. I appreciate that.
Yes.
Well, a lot of people say Behm, and I don't
Bam.
judge them. I guess technically it's German or something. It's just like I don't know. It doesn't mean anything. It means I'm from the Bohm region of Germany or something. I guess
Mhm.
the word Bohemian comes from the same last name. I don't
Oh,
know. Anyway, I am a designer and a musician and a whole bunch of other things that works in um, the entertainment industry. Right now, I'm the art director for an organization called Emergent Order, where I help run a YouTube channel called Dad Saves America, but it helps dads be better dads. Super stoked to have a film called To My Father opening at the Tribeca Film Festival on Friday.
that's awesome.
That's part of Dad Saves America. So I get to go to New York tomorrow for the premiere on Thursday. But before that, I spent 7 years building the design department at Rooster Teeth. I was like, I always forget. I think I was employee number 14. There was a time where the company was small enough that I could make lunch for people.
Wow.
And I left somewhere in the 400s. It was a very different company at 400 people at 14. Uh,
Yeah.
and it's been really the big story is just the journey that happened after that. We've been in Austin now for 13 years, and 7 of those were at Rooster Teeth, and it's been a big adventure, and you know I've been pretty happy to be able to go on it. Not that it hasn't been rough in places, but yeah.
So what was the impetus to starting? So after you left Rooster Teeth, was it immediately to no system, or were you kind of like meandering for a bit, trying to figure out the next step, and then it was like kind of fell?
Yeah. So I at Rooster Teeth, I think my job title when I left was motion design and creative services director. So technically, I was in charge of all of the design inside the organization, and some of that was merchandise. But I'd been doing less and less merchandise design over the years. So like, you know, I, one of the things I loved was, when you're working in a design department at a company like that, you're really creating things for the people that are fans. It's like you're creating flags for them to wave and have ownership of something. It's just like, oh, I want this shirt because, I really believe in the red team of
Yeah.
like red team, blue team. It's like I'm gonna wear my red team shirt, and being able to create something that makes someone feel like they're a part of something. Um, but when I left, there was kind of a big decision about I want to build something that I actually have some control over. That's the thing that I would have designed in the first place.
Mm.
And I was freelancing too. So it was sort of a combination of like, okay, well, I'm not going to be freelancing all the time. And so those times where I'm not freelancing, I'm going to build this no system so that, I've got something that's kind of continuing to let me do the things that I'm really passionate about, and sort of I don't know, the more punk things that someone might not give approval to, but that I think are cool and want to put out into the world.
Yeah.
Um, so it was really an opportunity to also just kind of try and like have an excuse for all of the random like hobbies that I have to kind of be mixed into one thing. So it's a playground, really. I mean, that's what it boiled down to, was I wanted to create something that allowed me to do my art in the way that I wanted to do my art.
Yeah, man. I really like I love your brand. I think it's great. I love the designs. I'm wearing one right now. For those who can't see, it says Adam Smith. I'm just standing up,
I've
but
got one on as well.
let me get rid of the name so people can see the. Let me see. I don't even know how to do this anymore. I
I believe in you. It's okay.
don't know. I
Don't
don't know
worry
how to
about
do it.
it. People.
I stink. But no, you guys should go to nosysnose.com and check out all of his designs. They're really great. And you yourself, you design them all.
Yeah, yeah. Um, Sometimes we're using little bits of clip art and stuff that we're manipulating and changing into other things.
Mm.
So, you know, but everything's going through me. Like I'm designing and rearranging and tweaking and really, the art project in a way is the brand. Um, the whole overarching thing of curating and trying to make this thing probably seem a little bigger than it actually is. Um, but yeah, it definitely all goes through me on some level. I mean, I'm the only one there right now. So
When you say making things seem bigger than they are, is that more of like is that kind of like the, I don't know how to rephrase that, but I remember hearing in a movie once, like sometimes being successful is projecting an image of success. Like,
yeah, I mean, there is a little bit of faking it till you make it. I I think that I was actually writing a blog post that should go up soon about a designer that I really love named Charles Anderson, um, who's really known for he found all of this vintage clip art, and I kind of started building out a stock image library. Very geeky design thing, but it's all like 1950s ephemera. He was a Minneapolis designer and probably one of the first designers that I really got into, but it always seemed like they were a lot bigger than they were, because they put on this big artifice of like we're this, monolithic giant design firm doing these retro things. And really, it was just him and a couple of other people screwing around. Um, there is a Hollywood like sort of entertainment side of faking it, but like to me, I just think it's kind of it's a little bit of a joke. It's just like I just am amused. Like it
yeah,
would amuse me to like make it seem like it's this bigger thing. Uh, because and maybe it does turn into a bigger thing, but like it's mostly just like it's the magic trick. And I'm really into branding, so it's an excuse to like, you know, build out the idea of what this company is.
yeah. I
It,
it's funny because I go through like similar like things sometimes where I'm like, oh, I really like doing this, and I'll like put, I don't know, like I always try and build something, and I have this problem, I guess, is where I'm going with this is I have this problem where everything needs to be like perfect and look as if it were like I was some Fortune 500 like releasing their website, and I don't know why. I think it's something I need to unlearn because you know
oh,
it,
I need to unlearn it.
yeah, because I mean I want like I'm getting to that point because with YouTube stuff especially you need to sort of like in how I've seen it is I just got to put stuff out there, and then each little thing needs to get better, and that's like kind of how I see like a blog or a website is that like or an online store. It's like you just kind of put the stuff there and make it available to people, and then maybe one day like you could put the bells and the whistles on it, but it's hard to know what the right formula is because I really like well flushed out websites and seamless, interactivity. It's better than going to a janky, website that someone's like just getting your credit card, possibly getting your
Yeah.
credit card information from. Um, but yeah,
Well, I mean, and that's actually one of the reasons why I've spent more time on trying to make the brand feel more real is
mhm,
so that someone might feel more comfortable putting their credit card info in.
yeah,
Like there's a lot of like cheap and because like it's print on demand and I use printers that are really high quality, but um, that's not always known as a vertical that's really high quality. Like it's
okay,
just like, oh, there's some weird Chinese company that's like stealing thousands of t-shirts, and I don't know who they are. They're going to send me some like discount t-shirt that's going to fall apart overnight, and they're going to charge you $20. It's like, no, we're going to send you a really high quality t-shirt um, that it looks as nice as anything Supreme puts out.
Yeah.
And we're going to charge you more for it. We're going to charge you less than Supreme does. Um, but yeah, I mean, I definitely would agree with that. That and I think that that's one of the things that one of the reasons that I started the company was because I needed to. I've always had an issue calling myself an artist, because there's a difference between art and design, where I feel like design is problem solving, and art is about expressing emotion to a certain degree, or like some sort of statement. And like I've never had an easy time calling myself an artist. And so to self-generate work without some sort of a challenge can be really difficult. And so the thing about building something like No System is that it's a problem that can't be solved, um, or a problem that at least has 10,000 different solutions. And so there's always something to tinker on. And so if I'm doing art, I know that I'm contributing towards this like bigger overall long-term project. Um, and it's still design, but because it's in this different context. Um, yeah, it's weird. I think you play mind games with yourself sometimes to get things to happen. And I'm sure we'll talk about neurodiversity, but that's definitely one of those things that, as someone with ADHD, has helped for me to be able to um, think about myself as an artist.
Can't can it be both? Like, can't you be an artist and a designer? I mean, because I think what you do is a good combination of I mean, because when you're designing something, you are problem solving, but you're trying to evoke enough of an emotion, a positive emotion with someone, or negative, I suppose, for them to latch on to that image and then want to have it forever. But there has to be an
Well, yeah,
artistic element, because you otherwise it would just be like, everyone just print the same thing over and over again.
right. No, this is very much a semantics thing about not feeling like I can call myself an artist, and not that what I'm doing isn't artistic, or having artistic merit. It's really more about uh imposter syndrome to a certain degree.
Right.
uh
Right.
like, you know it's that thing where, to call yourself a writer, do you write? If you write, you are allowed to call yourself a writer.
Right.
uh you know
Or
if you
correct.
create art, you're allowed to call yourself an artist. uh I think that design is art on a certain level. And it's not saying that there isn't any artistic merit inside of design. There's a lot, um, or can be a lot. It's more sort of just on a higher level. It's just like, what's the direction of that thing? Like, if am I solving it for something, or am I solving it for my own edification? That's sort of like on a higher level. Not that they're two different types of creativity. It's sort of more about the end goal. I don't know. For like I said, for me, it's as much about like just trying to be okay in my own skin as much as anything else.
So your artwork becomes like a way for you to deal with like your shortcomings. Like, maybe you feel like, oh, this isn't like maybe
No,
there's something missing, but when I come up with these new ideas, it helps like reinvigorate some spirit within you.
um, sort of. I apologize for my dogs going
No, you're
crazy
fine.
downstairs.
Yeah, you're good.
Um, yes and no. I mean, I there's a real vision for what No System is, and who we're trying to reach, and what we're trying to do. And all of that ends up sort of being the focus of how we're designing, and how we're trying to solve. I mean, we have a very clear idea of a worldview of how we imagine the world being a better place, and you know it's about slowly kind of marching towards that. Does that mean that there aren't sort of internal things from me too? I mean, probably. Um, the life of someone who's a designer, or an artist, or an illustrator, is that there's always things that you're trying to unearth. Um, there's a podcast that I like to listen to called Creative Pep Talk. This guy named Andy Miller, and he's been talking a lot lately about Jungian psychology. And
Hmm.
I don't know that I'm not going to do it service, but he's talking about unpacking the dark side of yourself and the things inside of your head, as a way to sort of understand your voice. Um, and I think that there's probably some of that. Um, for me, No System was as much about, I was really inspired by um, Andrew Breitbart, um, and his idea that politics is downstream of culture, and that the only way you can change anything is if you change culture, not politics. That there's nothing you can do on the political side that's going to change the world. And as someone who is probably a fatalist on a certain level, like I feel kind of that way anyways. I don't think
Fatalist. What's fatalist? Can you explain that?
I I have been using fatalism lately versus nihilism or nihilism because
Oh, okay.
I I have hope for a better world. But I also think that at least the people in DC are just pretty freaking incompetent, and nothing's gonna. Fatalism is like a for me a more realistic, slightly softer nihilism. I don't know. I mean,
Okay.
it's more being a realist. Like, this is screwed. Like, there's nothing that I can do in this situation to fix this thing. I would love to be able to have a solution, but like, I you I can't imagine that you look at it and think that we're ever fixing this ship.
No, no, and it's honestly, it's one of my biggest qualms I have with a lot of my liberal friends is like, because I recently started engaging with some of them on Facebook, merely more so like asking questions and like posting like their opposing opinions. Because no one, I mean, Facebook is about as echo chamber as it gets. Like as soon as your algorithm is figured out, like there's nothing from the other side. So I started being people's like, their little poke. But what I'm noticing is like nobody recognizes the real like problem, like the real rot that is deep within Washington D.C. And how it's not just like because everyone's complaining about the GOP and the conservative right and blah blah blah. Blah. And I'm like, well, I mean, the same problems are happening on the left. Like, and there's like you can't turn your eye to one and then focus on the other
Right. I mean, I think they have two different sets of problems.
for sure.
Like, they each have two different ideologies. This isn't me saying that they're all the same party, but at the core of it, it's party. At the core of it, it's power.
Yeah.
Um, and power has way more to do with everything than anything else.
So do you think
And
it's sorry, real quick, just to ask the question, like, do you think when you say it like that, does that mean like it's just one side or the other vying for the power to control whatever they want and not necessarily working to to help fix the collective? Like, we're one nation under God, as it were. Like, it doesn't seem like we've strayed so far from something like that that now it's become like, okay, whatever I can do to help my tribe. So the right is just focused on the right, the left's just focused on the left.
yeah, hmm, I don't. In this specific thing that I'm thinking about, I don't think about it in a tribal way. I'm not saying that there isn't tribalism going on with a right versus left thing. And I think that COVID really like just divided that exponentially,
Mm,
uh, and polarized us that much more. But I, I think that it's hard. I definitely think that there are people who want the power for a very specific reason. I think there's really just a class of people who just want to be in charge, honestly. They just feel like they are the people who were created on this earth to like rule over people.
yeah.
And those aren't necessarily even politicians. I think that that has as much to do with the head of a federal department, you know, looking at, say, natural gas stove policy. Really?
Right. Yeah.
That's somebody just deciding to, arbitrarily make a decision that's going to like end up erasing half of the gas stoves from the country and basically forcing people to get rid of their gas. Like you realize no one elected you to do that. Like that's an extra um, legislative thing that you're doing that has no legal authority or ground and should be struck down as a separation of powers issue.
Yeah.
Uh, but you're going to do it anyways because you know better. Um, that's the thing that like if there's anything that makes me mad, and gets me like really boiling, and one of the things that I really try and focus on inside of some of the message work that we do at No System is this idea that there is no one better than anyone else, and that's specifically, that can be chastising those people who think that they know better and want to set policy, or that can be uplifting to someone who's like, no, dude, you have value. Like, you don't have any less value than that, like, bureaucrat who knows better.
Yeah.
Uh, and they don't have any more than you do. In an ideal world, I would be an anarchist. And I think that anarchy as a name gets a bad rap. I don't know that I would ever use it because people think about anarchy in terms of chaos. And it's just like, no, just leave people the frick alone.
Yeah.
Let them do their thing and, maybe encourage them and convince them. And like, I don't think that that necessarily means that we have no government. I think that there are things that the government probably does do a better job of. God, that's a hard thing for me to say, but I'm not going to be able to outfit an army.
Right.
Uh, but yeah, I mean, it's just this idea that I don't think anybody who thinks that they are better than someone else and deserves to rule probably shouldn't be. It's at
Well,
the end of
there's an interesting like thing I want to touch on there because I think life is filled with insane amounts of gray area, right? And I think I may have talked to you about this before because when we look at like beautiful, like amazing art, right? Like what really brings depth to it and what brings life to it is like shading, right? Which are just gradations of, darkness and light. And that's where like something like this, when and I agree with your message, right? But I think there's an interesting balance that has to be brought to it because I think the acknowledgement that some people are better than others is a necessary part of navigating the world and your own growth. But I think realizing in this, and I think your messaging being like, we're human beings and we should be standing side by side to help each other to some degree. But do you understand where I'm coming from a little bit with, like, I do think that there is value in knowing that you're better at like graphic design than me. And I probably won't ever reach like your abilities,
right.
but
Well, and that's not what I'm saying per se. I
right.
mean, yeah, I mean, there's people who are going to be, I'm, I'm going to be a better designer. You're always going to grow a better beard than I will ever be able to grow. Like my beard does not come in. Um, we're we are all going to always have our differences. Um, but that doesn't make you any less worthy than,
Right.
I look at what Mike Rowe is doing to champion the trades. Um, you know, the world needs plumbers, the world needs electricians. And we have an issue with trades because we as a society decided that university was the way that you became someone and that it was looked down on if you didn't have a degree. Um, I don't have my degree. I have an associate in broadcast communications, and then I was working on a double major in graphic design and marketing and minoring in religion and taking honors classes. And I had ADHD. I didn't know I had ADHD. So credits are all over the place because as an ADHD person, like I rabbit holed in the areas that I wanted to rabbit hole. Um,
Yeah.
but I went through a whole bunch of stuff of like really feeling like less of a person because I didn't have a degree. Um, and I struggled probably harder than I would have inside of my career. At first, nobody asks anymore. In fact, this current job I'm in, I have because they wanted me. Um, when I started freelancing, the people that I was working for wanted me. I was the guy in town, like, oh, well, you need Brian. Brian's the guy who does that. Um, so that's how I end up getting to work with Robert Rodriguez. It's how I end up like I did a sports package for NBC at one point. All of that's because there's people who are like, oh, I need to work with Brian, even though I didn't have my degree. But like, I definitely thought less of myself for a long time because I didn't have my degree. Should I have? Probably not. But when I went to Rooster Teeth, and I think one of the reasons that, at least for me, it was so hard to leave Rooster Teeth was because it was one of the first times I was in a job that someone had heard of. Um, and so suddenly, this guy who has issues with, maybe being less of someone because he didn't finish college, is now somewhere where, lots of people see what you do every day. Um, you start getting more Twitter followers because, oh my God, you work at Rooster Teeth. Um, you start to build an identity out of that. You start to get value out of like, oh man, like I've been like, it's sort of like getting made in the mafia. Like, oh, I'm someone now. I'm a made man because I'm at Rooster Teeth. Um, and then I think that a lot of men end up like finding their value in career. And I'm definitely one of those people who invested way too much of myself into job. And so when I left and suddenly you rip that identity out, then you have to redefine who you are again. Um, and No System in its own way was a way for me to redefine it on my own terms in a way that couldn't be taken away from me in the same way, in a healthier way, in a hopefully more proactive way. I know that's a really roundabout way of talking about what I was talking about, but um, you know what Mike Rowe was saying and advocating for in the trades. We need electricians and we need plumbers, and there's nothing less. Uh, you know, you shouldn't think of someone less because they pick up garbage. Someone has to,
Right.
and that's a needed part of society. And I'm thankful for those people. I don't know that I would be a good garbage man, but there's somebody who is a really great garbage man, and I'm thankful that they're out there in the world and they're better than me at that. But
Yeah.
that doesn't make them better. If
True.
that makes sense.
No, true. Totally. And I think, I work in the trades. I work in construction, and it's hard to find good help a lot of times. A lot of the people who work for me, there's very few people my age. There's mostly older guys, and a lot of them are starting to age out. And I fear that we've created a society so delicate and so like hands off that it'll be really difficult to sort of turn the ship back around, because we double triple down on college education, and now we're, these fields are lacking. Like, it's hard. I mean, I know there's a lot of people who paint out there, there's a lot of people who do drywall, but like there's very few people who do it well. um, and who But those people are already in demand. They've been working for 20, 30 years, and it's hard to get them in the schedule. So I agree. And I worked in the automotive industry for a bit, or I worked with kids who would go to the automotive industry, and I try to tell them, like, this is difficult. You're going to work with your hands, you're going to sweat, you're going to, throw out your back, but you will make really good money doing it. And when you are good, you'll be in demand, because people will see how well you do. You work fast, you make good money, and that can carry you so many different places. Um, it's hard because I sort of tie it to, like, working out. So I've spent the last 6 months or so really going to the gym, eating better, fitting into awesome shirts that you make. And what I've come to learn is that you need to trust the process. And it's something that you don't realize until sometimes really far into it. And people don't realize it until they've gone 3, 4, 5, 6 weeks, like working, headlong into something, or sometimes months or even years. And, like yourself, like maybe not at first when you're at Rooster Teeth, but by the end, by the end of, was it 7 years you said? Like,
Yeah.
you realize, like, oh, like so many doors opened for me that I can, my name just sort of carries weight now, and they see, that I'm reliable, I do good work. And so, but it's hard to get to that point, right? I'm sure there was, how many days did you want to give up? How many days did you just want to walk out and be like, I'm good.
Oh God.
I can't.
I mean, I left Rooster Teeth, and like that first year, I mean, I, I was manic. I was suicidal that whole first year. Um,
Wow.
because you you rip the idea, like, okay, I'm gonna leave. I don't know what is on the other side of this thing. I am sort of being forced out because my ADHD. So it turns out that when you have ADHD and you don't know that you have ADHD, and you're in a really stressful situation, and Rooster Teeth was a very stressful company to work inside of, that can exacerbate all of the things that are ADHD.
Mhm.
And so all of my symptoms have been like causing a lot of issues. And so, I really needed to leave for everyone's part. I'm not saying that I was an innocent lamb. I'm in a much better, healthier place now. But like, you're in a situation where you leave, and like, okay, I'm gonna give up my salary. I'm the only breadwinner. I don't know what's on the other side of this thing. Austin doesn't have a lot of media companies, so I don't even know if there's jobs like what I'm doing out there. Uh, okay, I mean, I have your buy-in, Ange, my wife. I guess let's figure this thing out. Um, and so, yeah, I mean, you definitely. I think one of the best lessons I did learn was, to your point. Um, it was about a year later. I had a friend come to town for some business thing that he was doing, and we went out afterwards. And it happened to be my birthday, and we were driving around, and I took him over to Rooster Teeth so that he could see the building. I wasn't there anymore, but like, hey, here's Robert Rodriguez's studio over here. Here's Rooster Teeth, and he's like, like, I have always been your friend because I like you, not because I have any idea what Rooster Teeth even is. And like, it was a big reminder, because I really didn't, I really didn't have that context.
Yeah.
Uh, but the reality was, yeah, I mean, it's just sort of, you show up and you do the thing, and you try and not be an asshole. And that's got to be like rule number one in life. It's like, don't be an asshole.
Yeah.
Particularly in the entertainment industry. as a crew member. Um, you know, one of the biggest things is you're going to be spending a lot of time in the same room with someone. So anyone that you're working with needs to be understanding that they can work with you.
Yeah.
And so, like, a lot of people get blacklisted right away because it's like, God, there's no way I would spend a month working with.
I worked on a commercial like right out of high school. I was working with this guy. His whole family had been in the ad business for a long time, and this guy was coming up with this advert to fight a big apartment complex going into my hometown, uh, which consequently now is being built, but they delayed it for quite a while. The but I mean, it was like a whole day, maybe two, for like a 30-second commercial. It was like 2 days worth of work. And I mean, you're right. Like, it's like it was me and like five other people just standing with each other. And hey, I need you to do this. I need you to stand here and hold this or hold that over. Don't. So for as little bit of experience in the entertainment business I've had, like, I realized that right away. It's like, this stuff is slow. You're around people all day long I mean, we did 12-hour days. It was like 2 12-hour days back to back. Um, and it was, and I know that's nothing compared to like major productions, but it still was funny to see that they were going to take probably, I mean, we probably shot a few hours worth of footage for 30 seconds. Like, it was crazy. Um,
Yeah,
but
you can
yeah,
be
no.
as good, you can be the best person in the world, but like if someone doesn't want to work with you, it doesn't matter.
And that's something I got to say, and I feel out of place a lot of times in this space, because the people I generally talk to, like, I have genuine interest in who they are as people. And like, I don't really care where a lot of people have been. I I mean, I do, like, this podcast is to sort of highlight like who people are and where they've been, but like, I don't just take like, oh, I'm trying to get clout in this space, so I got to get that person. It's always about the individual. And I don't know. I liked connecting with people on a more human level, because I think there's a lot, especially in the YouTube commentary space, where it's just like everyone's just sort of like pulling on each other and like grasping on as long as they can and like boosting up. And it's like, I don't, I want to be known as someone who like genuinely cares. Like, if I call you up or I'm playing games with you, it's because, and I hope people feel that, and then it's hard because I'm trying to juggle 30 different things across, a couple of months. And I'm like, I hope it all still stays the same. And it's probably why I don't do as much content as I should, quote unquote. They say, just put out content, put something every day. I'm like, yeah, but then it doesn't mean anything. If I reach out to a specific person, then I know I have time to prepare. I can, look into them a little bit more, and we can have more meaningful like talks.
Yeah.
So, but
Yeah,
it's
I mean, I think everybody, I mean, you have to run your own race. Like, and I definitely think that, like, you know, finding the thing that like brings you a certain amount of joy inside of, I mean, it sounds like the way you're structuring things is the way that kind of works. I, I think the idea that you should put content out every day, if you're in a place where that's going to be a real stretch for you, is a horrible idea.
yeah,
Um,
yeah. It's definitely not in my wheelhouse. I can't, like, working full time, dad, uh, husband, all that stuff is just. And I think, like you said, I don't want to, and I don't want to force myself to do it. And I'd rather something semi decent, or if I see a news story that I'm like, okay, I'm passionate about that, and I can frame it around like being a dad and trying to raise a good generation like that, because that's sort of like the thread I try and pull through a lot of the stuff, is like, how is this related to, you know advancing culture in a good way? Because I'm in agreement with you. I think culture is where we need to start. Politicians are, they're just sort of leeching off of what's in the current culture. It's so.
well, and I mean, from a more technical standpoint, the algorithm is going to promote things that are engaging with people. And if you're creating content that is already interesting to you, there's a better chance it's going to be interesting to someone else. And so
Yeah,
you try to force something out, your passion isn't going to be in that, which means it's probably not going to do anything anyways,
Yeah.
because that's gonna communicate. Uh, I mean, I'm trying to figure that out right now. We tried to grow the business a little faster than we probably should have, and so now it's back to being just me. And I have been in the process of trying to find that sustainable rhythm and pace for how to do the thing. Things like Instagram are a machine that want to be fed all of the time. And so I've been spending a lot of time cleaning up photos for the Instagram feed. And it's just like all of the things need to get done. And trying to figure out what order to do those things in has been really hard. Do I put these two shirts out here? Do I put these two shirts out here? Like, all of this stuff is very serious. All of this stuff is very silly. Like, how do I balance that? Um, it's been a big challenge that I don't have an answer to. Um, but I'm right there with you. I mean, I'm trying to figure out the balance of all things of, like, you know, I have a job that usually runs 10 to 6. And so I get home like 6:30ish.
Mhm.
My kids are ready to eat dinner. We're going to watch a couple episodes of something afterwards, and they're going to be out. So
Yep.
that's the time that I'm going to spend with the kids that day. Um, and so how do I maximize that? Because that's not a lot of time. Um, Dude, I wish I had an answer. I've been seriously struggling of, like, trying to figure out the balance, and figure out how to keep this thing running and growing so that it can be more easy to keep running. It's like an engine, and getting the engine to turn over once it's turned over.
Yep.
But ahead of that, you're like really kind of pushing the flywheel hard.
Yeah, the that's something that I think about a lot with my I just think about it all the time because my content is I just try and do things that I just love. Talking to people. I would do this every single day if I could. If I could have one person on, I would sit here. Well, I always say, like, well, what do you want to do, like, with all this stuff? And I'm like, it sounds cliche, but I would take Joe Rogan's job in a second, like, just to talk to all those people and pick their brain on a dozen different things, even if it was two or three people a day. I would sit there and do that because it genuinely interests me to know who these people are, and what makes them tick, or what are their secrets or whatever. And same thing with the midweek hump, like on Wednesday nights, like, it's such like oh, okay, we made it halfway through the week, like, let's just chat about every single thing we can. Let's make fun of pop culture. Let's make fun of politicians. Let's get mad for a second, all that stuff. Like, because I feel like if I had a core group of people in my neighborhood, that's exactly what we would be doing. We'd be sitting in my driveway or garage, and we'd just be shooting the shit, drinking a beer. um, and so I'm like, okay, I guess I just have to start there, because if I'm doing what I genuinely enjoy and people can grasp that it is bringing me joy, well, maybe that's the starting point. And then as it goes along, it either picks up or it doesn't. And with that, I sort of have to know my limitations on it. It's like, well, okay, at what point do you call it quits and say enough is enough? Because my time is worth more than just kind of giving it away each week, which is it's and then I think again, and then this is, you get this stuck in your own mind prison, like, well, that's not fair to everyone because they are enjoying this stuff, and then you start thinking of everyone else and not your own health. And then before you know it, you're spiraling out of control into, some pretty dark places. So
I wish that I had no idea what you were talking about.
I know, right? It's wild. I mean, the
Like, I
whole
have not had every one of those conversations in the past 6 months of, like,
yeah.
okay, do I shut the store down? Like, we didn't really do the thing in the way that I wanted to. And, like, God, the hole that we dug is really big. I don't know how I'm gonna, like, dig out of this hole.
Yeah.
Uh, like, but I also still feel like I need to be doing the thing that I'm doing. So I don't know. I
What do
mean, but
you
yeah, I hear you.
so when I was talking with Adam Coleman, we were talking about purpose and how that's sort of an important part of, I guess, finding happiness in your life. What do you feel is your purpose? And do you think it's linked to what you're doing?
I think it's definitely linked to what I'm doing. Um, I here's where you can pull up that Liam Neeson gif of particular skill. Just like, when I was at Rooster Teeth, um, I really grew as a designer and like really learned a lot about running a brand, like visually on screen. Um, I touched all kinds of stuff. I used to joke that I was the CEO's roving assassin because my job really was just random, like, Brian, we need this thing fixed. Go over here and do this. I'm like, we need this. We need to launch a new channel. Go design the ID package for it. Like, oh, we're working on Laser Team. You're gonna go embed over at the VFX facility for the next 6 months. So pack up your desk and move to another building. Um, and so when I left, um, it was just like, okay, well, how do I felt like I had purpose inside of the organization, like we were doing something there. Um, but that's gone now. So how do I redefine that? Um, and I think one of the things I discovered, I've always been conscientious about, even if don't have the money to invest in something, I have time to invest in something. Uh, I got my job at Rooster Teeth in part because I had invested into others in the Austin film scene. And one of those people was a friend of the people who ran Rooster Teeth. And so they ended up connecting me there because, oh, hey, Brian does this stuff. You should talk to him. Um, but like, I have this sort of design passion that's expressed through no system. And really between the work that I do on Dad Says America in my job at Emergent Order and my job at No System, um, they both sort of channel these ideas of like worth and these sort of social ideas that like the world that I'm trying to change, um, and being able to like focus in on all of those areas of change that I think need to happen, bring a lot of worth. And I and I know that I find purpose in understanding that like I'm a unique person to be able to plug into the situation to solve this problem. And that like I've been given these gifts, um, and that I can do something with it. Um, going back to what you were talking about earlier with whether someone is better than someone else. It's like, yeah, no, I realize that I've been gifted some like really tremendous like creative skills
Mhm.
and that I'm very good at what I do. And and I'm okay saying that now and understanding that that's not conceited. Um, and I know that I can apply those things to I know that if I connect myself to this thing, it makes that thing better because I'm connected to it. It's like an aftermarket part in a car.
Okay.
Like you're going to put that thing in there, and that thing is going to run better than it would have before it was there.
Yeah.
Uh, and so I know that I can plug into those things, and you know, so I try and be conscientious about like, okay, what am I going to help? What am I going to do to, um, where can I plug in? And I was really thankful that I could go to Emergent Order and do that. Like, And it's one of those things where like really it all of the things that I learned in my years at Rooster Teeth end up applying to this thing that I care much more about than I ever cared about Rooster Teeth. So
So what are the two things that you think, like if you could just change tomorrow or today, what do you think are the two things you need to change for people to shift culture in a, I guess, a meaningful way? It doesn't, I guess it doesn't necessarily have to be like the most game changing, but what do you think would might influence people in a more productive path?
the idea that they have agency and that it's not necessarily the government's role to fix everything for them, and the idea that not everyone is your enemy. Like I think this idea that there's someone out there who yeah, I mean I just think this idea that you could disagree with someone but that doesn't make them evil. um you know like that would be a big thing for me if people could get to the point where they could realize that I you know I could disagree with this person and still be in relationship with them. I
Yeah.
think that would be a better place.
It's funny because I in my uh, prodding on Facebook, I've pointed out several things because there's being that it's Pride Month and everything. You're seeing people post like, "Oh, this is important." Like we Pride Month, respect everyone, and they'll make some people have made comments about why, or they've posted those graphics where it's like, why would you vote for someone who wants to murder you? and and I'll point out, I'm like, that there's people in the LGBTQ community who identify as conservative, or or there's trans individuals who consider themselves conservative, whatever, and it almost as if it short circuits their brain, right? Like they couldn't possibly grasp that. And 4 or 5 years ago, I was in the same boat. Like I've been told that these people don't exist. Conservatives are old, gray-haired white men. No women exist in that group. It's all so. It's been interesting trying to point that out because no one can give me a, a real answer as to like, what do you do in this situation? Like, are these voices that you want to hear too? Because you never want to hear conservative voices, but when I bring up that there's people within this community that you want respected, or you think that you think the GOP is murdering these people, like, then why would they be voting for people that are like, is it possible that they understand the nuance of where, like, why they might be conservative? Or do you like, because I've talked to a lot of Christians lately that are like, we don't care about most of this stuff like that. you know we're just we just think according to our rule set, it's not allowed, it's considered a sin, but that doesn't mean that we treat them any less. So it's hard for people to work in that, as you're saying, like, we need to learn to get to that point where I could say I'm conservative, and then you can go, well, I don't really like that, but I see you as an individual. Like, what and then we could have a conversation about whatever.
Do you know a guy named Daryl Davis? I mean, not personally, but are you aware of he's a blues musician, a black blues musician who started befriending Klan members.
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah, and he converted them, right? To
He's an amazing, but not, he didn't convert them. He just hung out with them and became their friend. And they converted themselves. Like, he's not, I mean,
good
he
point.
certainly was like talking about what he believed in and how he believed, but he wasn't telling anybody anything. He's just like, I'm gonna come hang out with you. I'm like, hey, yeah, do you want to come to our cross burning? Like, he would go out to cross burnings. Just hilarious. Like, the interviews with this guy, the stories he has are amazing. Um, it's like, yeah, no, like I became their friends. And like their cognitive dissonance ends up forcing them to sort of have to like come to a change on their own. Like,
Right.
how do I reconcile the fact that I hate black people, but I love Daryl,
Right.
and Daryl is in my life, and he's just loving on me, and he doesn't care. He just keeps showing up, and I'm like, maybe there's something wrong here.
Well,
Um,
that actually brings me, if I can share a quick story.
yeah,
I was on Twitter and I saw Tom Morello shared this thing. Who, the that's his name, right? The guitarist from Rage
yeah,
Against the
yeah.
Machine.
Rage Against the Machine.
Um, so he shared a graphic this week that said, if there's 9 Nazis at the table and one that's not sits down, there's 10 Nazis at the table. And like, and I didn't think of it, but that's essentially what you're saying is like Daryl goes to a Klan meeting. And that's why if the media right now today had seen Daryl Dixon or Daryl, is that his name?
Daryl Davis.
Daryl Davis, sorry. Daryl Davis
Oh, no worries.
at that Klan meeting, they would label him, oh my God, this guy is a white supremacist. We've seen that in the recent past of like what, hold on a second. Like maybe there's something else going on. Like this guy is trying to just be that light in the shadows. Like, hey, I'm just here as a person, and I understand you have hatred towards me, but maybe if you hung out with me for a little bit, you'd realize I'm not so bad, and I like good beer. Here you go, or whatever it is.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think that that's a big thing. The interesting thing, and I am not the one to unpack this, but this all sort of um, spirals out of um, denazification after World War II.
Mhm.
Um, there was I- so the Austrians, and I actually was starting to unpack this recently. There's a philosopher named Popper, who was a science philosopher, but was also writing other philosophy around the time. Who had proposed? He writes a book about the open society that ends up becoming the the name of the organization that Soros starts, and so. I then later found out that Friedrich Hayek was the one who proposed to the publisher that they publish this open society book of Poppers. And so I've been wrestling with trying to reconcile this thing, but the danger was that, in the aftermath of World War II, they were so concerned about, since Germany had risen up again after World War One, like we thought we dealt with this the first time, and this is back the second time. That the only way that we can ever survive is to be able to grow beyond like national governments and to basically salt the earth and force you know we can't even allow talk about Nazism because that they decide at that point that there can't be free speech for everything, and so all of that extrapolates into the current talk about you know basically anything that gets pigeonholed. It gets picked up by the critical theory people and off into a Marxist direction, but it has sort of a libertarianish underpinning to a certain degree.
Right.
And again, I'm not doing this any service at all, but like, you know, all of those ideas have roots somewhere else. And, that's just Morello um, parroting the same idea that has been parroted down the line of like, you know, one thing can't be allowed to exist because it might grow into something. And I think that that was a legitimate concern for those people in the day. The issue is that everything is redefined. It's like Godwin's law, like the person loses the argument who brings up Hitler first. Like, you know, some of these things, a lot of these things that are classified as, Nazi thought are just normal conservative people.
Yeah.
Um, and that's not fair because there's no conversation that can be had about what is that. Like you're now playing the conversation on their terms.
Right.
Uh, and I not to get into rules for radicals or anything else, but like, you set the terms of how the conversation is had. Unlike, I just think that the world is a lot grayer than that. because there's definitely things that you and I agree on and things that you and I probably don't agree on. But that doesn't mean that we're not friendly, and that doesn't mean that I don't care about you.
Right.
Uh, and like, I just think that we need to spend more time worrying about our own lane so that we can take care of others as best we can. But time's freaking short, and so focus on yourself.
Right. Yeah, no, that's kind of what I've learned is like all when it all comes to a head, I think the most influential we can be in our culture is like raising a good like a generation after, like our kids, raising our kids right, and that requires us to live a sort of self-contained life ourselves. You know, if we get too far outside of of that sphere, we won't be present for them, and they won't have the direction that they need. So I do my best to stay focused on them and be present with them. We read stories every night, sing songs, dance, be silly, um, and then and then when I can, I talk about this stuff because I think if I can reach another group of people in any way possible, then I'm doing that much more good. But really, the most important thing is being present right here, right now, because they are my kids remember all the big things in their life, and they look to me and they look to mom for that bit of guidance. And if I leave that behind, then i'm i'm doing I'm doing the future culture a huge disservice. But people lose focus of that through, I think, social media, through Facebook and Twitter. You're told you have to worry about this thing, you have to love this thing, you have to hate this thing, and you can't ask questions about it. And the problems in California, those are your problems in Texas, and those are your problems in Alabama. We never or it's very hard for a lot of people to separate those things. And I think the people who sort of saw through the bullshit through 2020 and everything, like, I think they're people who are much better at seeing the forest through the trees. And everyone else is, I think you're seeing more people sort of kind of come to with a lot of stuff. But even that, what I see on Facebook is a very highly curated, like, feed loop that I interact with. So I don't see all 300 people that I'm friends with on Facebook. I see
Mhm.
probably a rotating 10. So in my mind, I think, well, this is really bad. Like, well, in actuality, it's probably not. It's just these 10 people might suck, but overall, most people are just living their lives anyway, and stuff that happens on Twitter they're not even aware of.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that we definitely, like, probably have a different vision of the world than what's out there, in part because a lot of us haven't gone out there. I mean, I wish that I could be more of a world traveler than I have been. And I just haven't, we've never had the money to be able to do it. But we have done what we can and gone on big road trips and at least insert ourselves into different communities,
Yeah.
uh, and exposed my kids have been exposed to a lot of, like, my wife and I joke sometimes that we collect people. We just, we've had internet friends everywhere for a long time, and we would love for them to come to Austin and Texas. The reality is they're not. And so if we're driving and we have somebody that's like nearby as we're driving through, like, we'll stop and get a meal or something. And so, like, because of that, like, anytime we're on a summer vacation, like, my kids have been like, had the chance to meet all of these random people that mean something to us in our lives, and seen sort of the richness of all of these possibilities.
If you're ever in Salt Lake City, hit me up for
That's
sure, or
I
drive you
really
through.
need to get there. I have, speaking of people that I collect, I have a fascinating friend who is in Park City, who he's a Messianic Christian who was in one of the first Christian punk bands, but was also on Wife Swap at one point. Like, he's a
Wow.
fascinating, like, yeah, he's a fascinating individual. His name's Alan Aguirre. He was in a band called Scattered View, but I need to get out to Utah to see him too. So you will definitely be on the list if we get out
Cool.
there.
No, that's awesome. And Park City is not too far. It's a like 45-minute drive for me. Um, what's funny too is I wanted to bring up is that the like traveling, like world traveling, or even traveling within your own country is something that's like relatively new that I don't think people realize, you know, like, and well, especially world travel. Like world travel is not something that's been happening for eons, you know, like I mean, people, the idea of flying from one side of the earth to the other, like, I mean, do the math. I mean, you're what, 50 or no, not 50 years, maybe we'll say 100 years, 100 years old to go from, and that's probably stretching it, right?
Yeah.
So
I mean,
like
I think you could go slightly bigger than that and talk about, because there certainly were. I mean, there was the Spice Road, but not everybody was running all of that. So
well,
yeah,
yeah,
I
that's what
think
I
in
mean.
the modern context, like yeah,
Right.
it's the last
Like,
last 200 years that like travel really becomes like a doable thing that somebody
right.
might.
And I would even argue too, like I would say, I would hold firm on the 100 years being like where it was pretty accessible to most people. Like,
Yeah,
and maybe only 50 years where it was like a regular thing where like most people could like for the weekend, like go to Paris, you know, like
yeah,
it's pretty unheard of that we're at that point. So, but because of, again, because of the internet, because how you see all your friends, hey, you know, weekend in Boca Raton, and I'm going to Hawaii, and I'm going to India. It's like, ah, man, FOMO is real. It's like, it's, but that's not necessarily normal to be able to just go up and go. Most people are living within their community. They're living 3 to 4 hours around where they are. That number I kind of just pull out of my butt, but I'd be willing to bet that that's like the radius that people are in, you know. And I mean, I just think about my schedule, and I have a pretty normal job, you know. It's about as normal as it gets. So, you know, a vacation a year, and I usually stick within, you know, lower 48. I mean, I lived in Hawaii for 10 years, so we do have some connections to go there, but you know, it's expensive, especially with 2 kids now that you pay full price
yeah.
on. So it's hard. It's hard not to experience the FOMO, but it's it's funny thinking that world travel is still in its like sort of infancy as far as people experiencing it.
Yeah.
Um, but I'm right there with you. I would love to go. I would love to go overseas. I've never been to Europe, and I would love to go and meet people.
No, it's on the list of things that I would love to. If money weren't an option, we'd be going. My wife's aunt and uncle retired north of town here. They were living in Los Angeles, and they couldn't decide whether they wanted to retire here to a town called Georgetown or if they wanted to retire to the south of France. And so they did both. So they don't spend their summers here. They spend their summers in the south of France. And so I love to give them shit for like summering in the south of France.
Oh,
Um, but but yeah, no, it's not normal. I mean, it's a thing. Um, but that does speak to um, how standards of living have just gotten exponentially better for everybody under, you know, capitalism, for lack of a better word.
yeah.
Um, I tend to use free enterprise more, but yeah, I mean that doesn't become something that is a commodity that people can do unless I mean look at the cost of space flights that have been dropping exponentially. One of the reasons that I'm so excited about Starship is the amount per pound that they'll be able to carry up from Starship is like exponentially cheaper than anything that's ever existed, because of economies of scale. And it
And
changes everything.
this is Elon Musk's thing, his
Yeah,
new
yeah.
rocket.
I mean that, yeah, sorry. One of the things for me is I probably end up way too interested in all kinds of things. And so I've been completely fascinated by everything that's going down in South Texas with um, Elon Musk's Starship. Um, it's a really important thing, maybe the most important thing that's happening in the world right now,
How
because it's
come?
the thing for the reason that, and I'm still unpacking this. Um, but Glenn Reynolds, who's a blogger over at Instapundit, was mentioning this in a post he made recently. He's a law professor at the University of Tennessee, Knoxville, um, and he has a paper on space law. And the thing that he was quoting was from going back to travel again, was talking about Columbus. Um, and one of the things that was important about Columbus is that the Western Europe at that time was in a very similar position to where we are as a society, in that everything had been discovered. There's nothing left to do. There's no magic about what exists over the horizon. And like that creates a really bad argument for the whole manifest destiny thing that happens later on. And like, I'm not arguing for whether or not we should have taken it to the United States, but um, the same thing with space. Like, we're in an era where I think all of us feel a certain degree of restlessness. The idea of what 200 years from now looks like to any of us probably doesn't look that much different than what today looks like. Everything's done. And I don't think everything is done. Um, but we're sort of getting into that same place again. And so Starship, by suddenly making it exponentially cheaper to get lots of weight up into orbit, finally gives us that place where by setting off into the stars, maybe we give ourselves hope as a um, as a species again, because now we're in a place where we can expand out into the universe, and there's always a possibility of things changing and growing, and there being different opportunities elsewhere. Um,
I like that answer because I think I felt like the big argument was, oh, we got to get off this planet because we're destroying it. And I'm like, well, if that was the case, like, like, wouldn't we just fix what we have here? Like, I don't think we're experiencing a global catastrophe necessarily. Certainly not the expert on it, but, um, and it also doesn't help that every single thing that has been told about, climate shifts and everything hasn't happened. And maybe that's due to the mitigation that we've done, but based on
but
how I kind of see it.
regardless, if we stay here and there's a massive solar flare or there's an asteroid, there anything else, none of that factors into global warming at all. That's
Right.
still a life extinction event.
Right.
If we happen to be on 18 different planets and out in the solar system and heading out to the edges of dark space, like, we continue to exist. Like
That's true. No, and go ahead, finish. Yeah.
oh no, I don't think that people understand how important that is.
Well, and I think and I agree with you. And I think for the reasons you were saying, like, even I think it'll spark innovation in ways that hasn't happened in a long time. Like, we haven't really ventured to space in decades, right? So, like, like, maybe the next technological jump is due to, you know safely getting a giant payload to the moon or to Mars, because we have to. We need to figure out a way to create a more sustainable life or be able to terraform a small patch of Mars or whatever. Because, again, I like the idea of it. I don't think it'll happen in our lifetime, but I think getting to a place where we can set up future generations to do that is part of our duty, because like what's the next frontier? We've seen everything here, and while I would love to explore the oceans, like what could possibly, like what is for us down there? I still think it would be fun though. I think exploring the oceans is something we should do because it's a whole new world that we don't know anything about. Um, I saw a clip the other day of, it was Neil deGrasse Tyson talking to, I assume, another astrophysicist, and he was saying, like, how much of outer space, of our solar system, have we explored? And she's like, well, if you put like our solar system, like, and think of it in terms of the ocean, we've basically said, like trying to determine if there's more life. What we've done is we've looked in the stars and scooped up a 12-ounce cup of water and looked in it and said, well, there's no life in there. So there is no life. And she's like, that's ridiculous, obviously. Like there has to be life outside of that 12-ounce cup of water. And that's sort of where we're at with our own solar system, not necessarily solar system, but our, the galaxy, and then just deep space in general. Like it's so empty, and we haven't been able to see everything. So I'm really interested to see like what, and science fiction's always been something that I grasp onto as like this, maybe we could one day, just hop into like a starship and safely go to the edge of space. Even if it meant leaving everything behind.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's definitely something that like I think about a lot. Um, yeah. When I first started at Rooster Teeth, the first summer that I was at Rooster Teeth, um, my my dad was dying, and I promise it connects. But I'd listened to Ender's Game, and then after that, I listened to you know Speaker for the Dead is technically supposed to be the follow up to that book, but like the Enderverse goes all over the place now, and it's a mess. But Speaker for the Dead was the book that he really wanted to write in the first place, and there's this technology in there called an Ansible that allowed people on another planet to talk to a different planet in real time, even if they were separated by like light years. And so, because of relativistic time travel, if you were to time travel, I mean, if you were to space travel back to the other planet, everybody would be dead.
Right.
And so it was a way that you could see people. And so I was listening to that book this summer. My dad was dying of cancer and really feeling like he was on another planet. Well, that year there was 100 days of 100 degrees here in Texas, and there was a massive forest fire out in this town called Bastrop to the east of Austin. And
Uh-huh.
so I would open up the door to my Rooster Teeth office onto this like blazing white cement parking lot and feel the heat beating off of that and see these apocalyptic storm clouds on the horizon from where the forest fire was, and know that my dad was living on another planet dying from cancer. It was a tremendous summer.
Wow.
uh, but you know um, yeah, I love the idea that there's stuff out there for us to go out and explore and discover. Um, my wife's the Star Trek person. Like I was a Next Generation person growing up. And
Yeah.
never really feel like I have time for TV now. But I really believe we need to be out there, kind of discovering.
Yeah. And you know what too is, like, to kind of go back to what we were saying about, improving culture and stuff like that. I get the feeling that someone like Elon Musk is as extraordinary as he is, and a lot of times those personalities can be a bit, you know, I guess selfish. He seems to be one of the few that is like genuinely trying to help people on a broader scale, and however he might be doing that, people think, oh, buying Twitter and running into the ground, like that doesn't make a difference. And I don't know, like it seems like his intentions are good. I mean, it's hard for anyone to buy a company as expensive as he did, and lose money and still carry on, and he continues to do it. His venture into electric cars and now space travel, like, sure, he's making money out of this, so there's sure some selfish element to it to be lucrative, but it seems like a lot of what he invests his time into is to help the human race endure in the long run.
Well, here, let's think about it from a math perspective. Say 2,000 years from now, we've expanded out to other planets. The population that you can have is going to grow because you're going to have more capacity to grow. And so we've had one Shakespeare, like we've had all of the things that we've created here. How much more potential is there out there if you scale those numbers in a way where the human experiment is happening elsewhere and it scales up? And that is, I mean, Musk is certainly going to capitalize on that to a certain degree. But I, in a similar way, I honestly think that Twitter may also end up being one of the most important decisions he ever makes. I think in a random way, preserving the capacity for an edgelord to be an edgelord may be the thing that saves Western civilization.
Can you expand on that a little more? What do you mean?
I can. It created a space that to a certain degree couldn't be controlled. And I think if you look at the Twitter files, it's pretty clear that government made a huge attempt to control all communication. And it creates a sort of irritant where the narrative has shifted, and they can't control everything anymore.
Yeah.
And the ability for them to control a narrative is really important to them because they don't always have facts on their side. So they need you to think about things in a certain way. And to do that, they control the marketplace of ideas, which is why they, something they don't agree with, they don't want to even exist because it's anathema to them that someone would believe something that they don't think is appropriate. And Twitter is an irritant. They can't control it to a certain degree, and we can know that they were trying to control it, and we can know that they failed at controlling it. I think it's as important for us to have known what they were doing as it is for something to be there, because we didn't have any of the proof that these people were trying to do what they were going to do in an official way until he bought the company.
Yeah.
And if you think that your money is going to be worthless at some point anyways, why would you not spend $44 billion to be able to potentially control something? Why you can't?
It's a good point. I didn't think of that. Yeah, the Twitter files were quite eye-opening, and I think, well, I mean, damning on many levels, but like sort of vindicated a lot of people who were like called crazy for for saying this stuff, and it's to some extent it's fair, like, oh, you're making all these accusations that this is happening, but then it's like, well, see, we told you it's all right here, like it, and I remember I covered the first like 3 or 4 that came out, and it was just kind of upsetting to see all of it, because I really wonder what the 2020 election cycle would have been like had everything just been like on the level, and if people had been allowed to sort of communicate how they want, and now on YouTube, I guess they're allowing you to talk about like election stuff and funny business and whatnot, and not taking it down, which, I understand that to a point. You're kind of beholden to your advertisers and stuff like that, but it just, I don't know. But to what extent, platforms like Twitter and YouTube are the place that the conversations are happening. The place. And when you take stuff down because you don't like a particular thing, you're changing that conversation. You're changing how it's engaged with, or when it's engaged with. And that's just as important to hear bad ideas as it is to hear good ideas.
Well, and I think the thing that's important, because there's all these people who are like, well, but they're a private company. Just like, no, they were being controlled and driven by a government organization,
Yeah.
and they had ideological alignment to a certain degree. So yes, I mean, in part they were doing this because they all believed the same things. But you know, if a government organization is harassing you to do something, then they are now extra constitutional involved in this thing. Like
Mhm.
it's not, it's unconstitutional for the federal government to be trying to control speech the way that they were. And so no, it's not a private company thing anymore after that point. Like, plus there's the whole like if they're operating as a utility thing, then that too is like if they're going to have protections from lawsuits because of content, then they can't be doing that either. And
Right.
so, but you know, I don't know. I mean, I am not a lawyer. I am not your lawyer. Uh, so do not take legal advice from me. Um, but it's just it's more sort of a philosophical thing that that's a really bothersome thing, and that you would gaslight people to just make them feel like they were crazy and that they're alone.
Yeah.
And we're like, no, no, you're not alone. There are other people who feel this way too. And
Yeah.
this is not an extreme opinion.
Yeah. I think that's where I felt most betrayed, um, both by all that, and then friends is like how people will try and isolate you when you speak on things that go against approved like narratives. I don't even like saying that phrase because it sounds like, I don't know. I hate sounding like that, but
Yeah.
that's the best way to say it. Like when I'm saying, hey, this doesn't add up, or especially when it came to like the Trump stuff back in like 2019 and everything, or even before that. I'm like, hey, this doesn't seem right. Like they totally lied about what he said. Well, it doesn't matter. He said this and this. I'm like, no, no, no. They lied about what he said right here. It's totally taken out of context and totally changes the meaning of the statement. Like that's not okay. Like I mean, it's like I don't understand. Like if conservatives were doing this about a Democratic candidate, you guys would be losing your minds, like melting down over this. So, like, let's keep it consistent. And when people weren't keeping it consistent and they were making me feel like I was a crazy one or I was not a good person for even considering that this guy could be like okay or like his policies would be okay, that's where I was starting to draw the line. I'm like, this is not good. And then again the federal government coming in and trying to interfere with information because they felt it was good or bad. Like, no, that's a totally against the Constitution. Like, but then and then how do you combat people who goes, well, it's just a written document. It's a document written by people. And I'm like, oh, is this the conversation we're having now? So like nothing means anything anymore. It's all just
This
like,
is why I'm a fatalist.
yeah, right. Right. We've come all the way back. We're back to fatalism. Yeah. No, it's
What are
it,
the things that you have some level of control over? How can you make the world a slightly better place? And like, how am I stressing out about something that like I don't have any control? I can't change this thing. I need to, it was very interesting. I remember I was at Rooster Teeth in 2016 after Trump got elected. And a lot of the people that I worked with there had never been through an election before because a lot of them were kids that had been going to UT in Austin and came into the company, and it was their first big job out of university. They'd never had an election that didn't go their way. And like I had to explain to them, it's like, y'all, I have lived through multiple administrations that I did not support. I mean, really. As someone who probably leans anarchist, like I don't agree with any of them on everything.
Yeah.
But it was just like, you will survive. Like the country has survived 4 years of other presidents. Just like
Yeah.
I survived Obama, I survived Clinton, like I survived Herbert Walker Bush. Like they
I
all,
mean, you even Bush, who had two planes hit a building in his we all survived that. It's, I mean, not all of us, but maybe that
yeah,
line was in poor taste, but you know what I mean,
too
like,
soon.
yeah, yeah,
Well, at
right.
what point is it's like 20 years. I feel like too soon doesn't really work anymore with
Now,
that.
I've heard some really good 9/11 jokes, but but even then, like even now, like 22 years later, I'm just like, ooh, like I don't know, man, like I don't know if it's that
Yeah,
funny, but I don't know. I think everything
yeah.
is funny. Everything can be funny, right? Can't get in the
Pete
way of
Davidson
comedy.
has some pretty good 9/11 humor. His new stuff.
Yeah, yeah. His dad died in 9/11, correct? So yeah, there was a couple. I think it was at the roast of Justin Bieber. He made a joke about his dad at his dad's expense. It was the first time I had heard one, and I was just like, like, oh my god, like I guess we're doing it now. I guess it's okay because this guy did it. But it's
Um,
no, and I agree with you. I think that people, it's easy to be overly hyperbolic, I guess, about presidents and, oh well, if Trump gets elected, no one, everyone's going to be killed. And it's like, what? Come on now, like even the like most radical, like crazy president, like everyone, like most people have come out fine. The majority of the population is good. It doesn't mean that whoever was affected by it is, it's not okay. But like, at least in my lifetime, I've seen the country move in great strides forward. There's things that we obviously didn't. I think the foreign wars we've been involved in have been, bizarre and regressive in a lot of ways. But I think upping our standard of living, seeing where we were, um, 20, 30 years ago. How old am I? And then and where we are today, we've done a lot of things. We've been great innovations over many presidents, and we've done even someone like Trump, who on the outside and even on the inside a little is pretty rotten and weird. Like there were some good things done to groups who thought that they were probably whose lives they thought were at risk. And it's but that's a hard pill to swallow for people. They don't want to see the good. Like the situation with Daryl Davis, that becomes like a sort of like, with me, it was like, okay, I'm going to follow Trump's doings and see, like, I'm going to try and take each one as I go. And like, okay, that wasn't that bad, but he still said this, it's like, you got to meet these people at the table.
I'm not a Trump fan.
Right.
Like that, that's the thing. It was just like I, I'm really not any politician's fan anymore. But like, it's just, yeah, yeah, the world's a great place. And so I just try and focus on the things that I might have some level of control over. For me, that's like trying to put out the positive messages and messages of change through no system that I've been trying to do. Trying to help dads be better dads through the Dad Says America thing. You know, what level, what do we have some semblance of control over? Like, that's all we can worry about is we don't have infinite capacity. And like worrying about something that you can't control at all, like things are going to happen. Like I can hope and pray and work for change, but at the end of the day, like Caesar's going to be Caesar.
Right. No, it's and I think that's a good, I just think that's sort of like what we've been talking about for a while now here, is like, we just kind of have to figure out what our lane looks like and stay there, and sort of combat things as they encroach on us, and not necessarily inundate ourselves with issues that just don't affect us on a broad scale. like I do believe that there's certain things that we shouldn't be pushing in the modern culture because I think it could be destructive. But like again, like I don't think that, like, do I think that it's reasonable that everyone will save their selves for marriage to have sex? No, I don't think that's a reasonable thing. But I can still talk, and did I? No, but I can still talk about it as if I think this is something that could create something positive for the future. Not having multiple sexual partners, blah 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 blah. It doesn't mean that everyone has to live that way. It just means I believe that this is the right thing to do. And if you want to live like that, you'll probably be a happy person, or it might, you know. But I think society's gotten to a place where one person says something, if it's broadcast enough, they believe it's something that's it's trying to be forced on someone, and that's not always the case. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, the best we can do is try and affect change in our immediate life. And I've said this for a long time now. Be involved in your community, your local elections, even though politics kind of sucks wall to wall. But local politics is kind of where you're going to probably instill the most change in your life. The president rarely has a broad sweeping effect on things, um, at least in my opinion. But
There
but
was a
Brian,
time.
oh, go ahead.
There was a time. I want to say it was the 1800s. So like this is going way back, but there was a time where the president could just wander out. Like I want to say that there's a story about Harrison just like wandering out for lunch because the president was like just not a thing. Like, it was definitely a different era of media too, where he could be relatively anonymous. But like, you know, the president was not necessarily looked at as this like royal figure. And I feel like now the whole system has changed to a
Yeah,
certain degree. I
I cert
bring back boring presidents and boring government, and you know
right. No, and I think that's one of the problems of, like, without going down another rabbit hole, really, is like one of the problems with the 24-hour news cycle is it sort of made the the presidential elections into this, like, almost like Super Bowl, like, year long Super Bowl where you're always covering it, and these people do become celebrities. It's like, I mean, Trump even proved, like, you don't even have to be in politics anymore. Like, you just gotta be a showman at this point, and it's which is kind of a bummer. I mean, I guess it's good and bad. You could take it either way, but in some regards, Trump getting elected kind of showed us, like, how meaningless it can be, um, to be a politician or not. And it's I don't know, man. It's I don't want to be as black pilled as I am sometimes, but I do have hope for the future. I have to, because my kids, like, I feel like I have to, because my kids need that. They need that light. Um, and if I don't give it to them, you know, I, and the best way I know how to do it is just how we've been saying: concentrate on the best parts of our local day, like sports and the sunshine and running around outside and digging up worms and getting muddy, like all that stuff. I think it makes a huge difference to them. They learn how to have fun and be themselves. But
I
it's
think I would go one step past that
go ahead.
and also instill in them that like the future isn't written, and that they are going to have a certain amount of being able to define what the thing is, and that they have the power to bring things into existence. That I I feel like if there are any issues in our society, it's that we are all a little too myopic about the fact that we have some semblance of control, and that we do have agency, and that we can change things. They may not be on a macro level, but even the smallest of changes can ripple outward. Um, and I just want my kids to know that they can. I mean, for me, I didn't ever have anybody model. Like I talked about this designer named Charles S. Anderson earlier. He was one of the first people, even though I never knew him, who had modeled for me that you could be a designer and make a living. I didn't get that from my parents. Like the idea that you could be an artist or creative and make them. My parents are teachers. It's fine. There's nothing wrong with being teachers. But like My kids have had modeled to them that you can make a living out of the way you present your ideas. And like that's a really important thing to have modeled for you, that
Yeah.
you have some agency over being able to like either be entrepreneurial or, even if you choose to have a job somewhere, that you can have some push to change things inside of that system.
Yeah.
Uh, and so it is being aware of the world like you were talking about, and being and paying attention to those things, but it's also just realizing that you have value, and because you have value, and because humans have the ability to create, that we can change things.
No, it's good, man. It's a good place to wrap it up because it is getting a little later. I want to thank you for coming on, man. I enjoy every single conversation we have because it's always insightful. I was
Well,
actually
we
looking for
covered
your
a
podcast.
lot of things.
We did. I was looking for your podcast on Spotify. Is it still there, or did you take him down?
It should be there unless I didn't pay the bill. uh God knows I've been struggling with that lately. um there is no system. I see it there.
Okay, maybe I don't
I
know.
need I need to do more of them. Like it's been on the list. I'm trying to get back to it. Again,
There,
talking about the balance. Like that's something that I really feel is it's probably important. Like in terms of the things that I care about, podcast is something I care a lot about. But it's been like, do I create things that I can sell, or do I create things that I don't know? It's been a balance.
so
Trying to
the
figure.
it's called There Is No System, right? Is the podcast?
Yep, there is no system. You need to make sure that you put the underscore in between no and system.
That's why I didn't see it. Okay, so there is no underscore system. You guys should check out the podcast because there's like what 6 or 7 episodes on there, I
Yeah,
believe.
and if you like our rambling conversation today, that's very much what the podcast is.
Yeah, and it's so good. He does an amazing job editing it and like all the sound engineering you do on it. Whatever you do on there, it sounds great. I love listening to those episodes. Uh, Please, guys, check out his stuff. Go to nosysnos.com. I have a link down in the description if you want to go there. There's a discount code if you want 15% off um, with my code. But please check out his stuff. He does great work. Stuff I support when I can. Um, but yeah, do you have anything coming up, Brian, that you want to talk about real quick?
Um, uh, just we have this film premiering at Tribeca on Thursday that I'm excited about. But yeah, go check out the podcast and check out the store. And then Dad Saves America on YouTube is the other channel that I work on. I am not on camera. My boss is, but I make all the graphics. I wrote the jingle. And so it's a good show. I care a lot about it. It's something that I feel really uh, is super important. I'm thankful that I get to work on
Nice, man. I'm thankful that you're doing it. I'm thankful that I have the opportunities to talk with you. Consider you a friend for sure. Like we've had some long conversations, and I look forward to doing this again. Hopefully you'll want to come
it. Yeah.
back and we can talk. We can
Oh
talk
no,
more
definitely.
about. Cool. Anyways, guys, we're gonna roll the credits. We're gonna do a segment over on locals just for everyone who is a paid member over there, just for some behind the scenes and extra material. So if you guys are subscribers/members over there, you can check out the stream. It's live right now. Thank you guys so much. We'll see you guys next time. Make sure you hit the like button as well. See you.